Hi, I'm John Way, and tonight we're on location near Boston with Dave Zolla from DZMods. Dave's been a lifelong friend and is one heck of a luthier. We understand you've made a Les Paul style guitar called the Mor Paul. Could you tell us a little about that?
Well, sure. The Mor Paul is a play on words, obviously. Because I couldn't afford my Les Paul custom, I was always buying Les Paul copies, and the Japs were making some pretty good copies for low bucks, and I'd buy them used. You know, I could mow lawns or whatever and come up with a decent Les Paul copy. And I really liked the look of a Les Paul. I never actually held a real one. I used to go down to the music store and they had one in this glass case. I used to stand there and stare at it for hours until they'd throw me out of the store. I would buy a copy and then I'd start upgrading it. This thing's pretty road worn. I started building it in 1972. It's been through a number of incarnations. So I originally had the two dual sound DiMarzios and a super distortion in the middle. I did a 3, like the customs, like the old customs had a 3 pickup. And it was dyed in chocolate brown. I couldn't do edge binding then. I couldn't do fingerboards. I couldn't do inlay. I was just, basically starting out. But the guitar came out pretty good. And I played it for a long time. And then I started managing music stores, and I could buy guitars. And I ended up selling it to a guy for parts. The guy I'd sold it to had lost it in a poker game to a guitar player, buddy of his, who abandoned it in his mother's cellar, and it had been sitting there for the whole time. He brought it over, and it wasn't here 10 minutes, and I had ripped off the bindings, wiggled off the headstock, basically just took all the bindings off it. By then I had learned how to do a lot more stuff. I was in my 30s at that point. So when I had the headstock off, I extended the neck. I added the 3/4 of an inch different scale. I cut a new ebony fingerboard. I did all the bindings, did high frets. I always wanted to put an ebony board on it, didn't have it. I got it now. The face on these guitars are birch plywood, and they're steamed and pressed. It's because they were a cheap guitar and they wanted to make a carved look without making the guitar expensive. And what that coincidentally does is it, I don't know if you can hear that, but there are hollow spots. See, it's solid here, and then you can start to hear the airspace. This whole area around the bridge is arched from the mahogany block and glue body. The only thing that the sound of a guitar is based on is basically the 5-inch radius around the bridge. That's acoustic or electric. People tell you all this wooden stuff in the body and the neck and the back makes a whole big bunch of difference. It's just not true. What this is a speaker. This is the driver. This is the cone. Acoustic guitar, electric guitar, doesn't matter. Acoustic guitar has the amplifier box, but basically it's this area. If there's resonance there, it'll translate to the pickups. I put an inch of mahogany on the back of the guitar. It looked like a disco shoe. It was so fat. It just didn't look right. So what I decided to do was I decided to arch the back so that I could carve away some of the wood and make it look sleeker. People thought the guitar was hollow. It's not. It's solid. It weighs 13 pounds. And the other thing that is not important to the sound of a guitar on any level, the neck. There's a lot of myth in guitar building and a lot of myth in manufacturing because they market and they have to show differences in their products. I got to tell you, there's 3/8 thick ebony of the fingerboard in front of the truss rod. There's 1/8 of an inch of wood closing up the back. I took it all the way down to the truss rod and then took an 1/8 inch piece of maple and glued it over and reshaped it. There's virtually no wood behind the truss rod. In some spots, I don't think it's even 3/4 of an inch thick. And if it didn't have that truss rod setup in it, it would fold. It's whippy. I'll tell you, it's thin and it moves. But they wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of creating and designing that truss rod. And what were they renowned for? What was Martin renowned for? They were the greatest sounding acoustic guitars that were ever built. And they had thin necks,
So all the tone would go to where it needed to go.
minimizing anything that was going to be lost. Less wood here, smaller sponge, more sound to the face. And that is the point. I wanted a tremolo that would stay in tune, and the only one I really found that could take the beating is the Floyd Rose double locking system.
But in the beginning, you always loved the look of a Bigsby.
I love the look of a
What did you do
Bigsby.
here?
I faked this one out of plexiglass. The first one I did, which I still have on my other Mor Paul, I actually milled a Bigsby down. And then I realized that by the time I'd done all that, I could fake one out of plexi and cover it and give it that look. So this is just cosmetic. And of course, the Bigsby arm, I was a Bigsby guy, and there's a hesitation. The Bigsbys, you got to finesse them. They have a certain feel to them that's different.
So that arm gives you that feel.
It gives me that feel. It's a Bigsby arm, which I bent and twisted to work with adapted to the Floyd Rose. And also, I've compromised the Floyd Rose down. This will drop a full octave. It works as a hardtail as well because I've got these wings in here, which you can take out if you don't want them, and you can have a floating tailpiece. But
nice feature.
I tighten the springs beyond anything. It's hard to push, and most people aren't going to like it. It's too stiff. But the reason I do that is because when you're playing this thing live and you lose a string, and unlike a floating tailpiece, it stays in tune because there's enough back tension on the springs, or at least close enough to in tune, that you can get through the tune, you can finish the song. But since the guitar was so thick, I didn't want to cut a big hole through the back of it. So it's front loaded, which led to cutting those 3 pickup holes into one big cavity and loading it from the front. So what I've got is I've got 4 humbuckers. I know that's excessive. That's why it's a Mor Paul. I mounted the pickups in the bezel so that they all come out together. If you take the pick guard off and you pull the thing down, you can actually walk them all out in one piece. So you can just lift out that and out they come. You can adjust the tremolo. I brought the neck 1/4 of an inch in and a 1/2 inch that way so that I could have the full Fender scale.
So you have 25.5-inch scale,
Yes.
22 frets.
22 frets, Fender scale. And that left enough room for 7 single coils.
7.
Yeah. What we have here are 4 humbucking pickups. They happen to be Seymour Duncans. These are all JBs. I think this is a Baby 59. Either that or it's a mini JB. So basically what I have here is 2 sets of humbuckers.
Sure.
So this is where people think that's very confusing, because you've got all these switches. But it's really quite simple. So we got a 3-position switch, a 3-position switch, and a 3-position switch. This is pickup group, we'll call this pickup group B.
Okay.
Call this pickup group A.
Sure.
This is group B, this is switch B. This works just like a Gibson 3-way system. Back pickup, front pickup, both pickups. Just like a standard Gibson.
Sure.
This is pickup group A switch. Same deal. Front pickup, back pickup, both pickups. So there are 2 3-way Gibson setups next to each other.
Sure.
That's all it is. This selects group A, group B,
Or both.
or both.
That's great.
This gives you the possibility of any combination that you can think of. These are all single coil cut switches. They just cut each pickup to a single coil. So when in this position, they're humbucker. In this position, they're single coil. So in this position, this coil is active, this coil is active. This coil is active, although they're so close to each other, I don't really think it would matter. And this coil is active. So basically what happens now, we got volume for group A, volume for group B,
Okay.
tone for group A,
Perfect.
tone for group B. In humbucking mode, if you want to call it a mode, when I set group B like this and group A like this, I've selected this pickup and this pickup. Now this switch works as a regular Gibson 3-way system. Front pickup, back pickup,
In both.
both, just like a standard Gibson. Now, between cutting them to single coil and double coil, with all the positions, there's one of my buddies figured out there's well over 200 possible combinations, which who needs, I don't care. I'm not going for 200 combinations. What I want is 5 or 6 specific sounds. I can get Stratocaster, Telecaster, Les Paul. I can approximate any sound I want by knowing how to. Now, a lot of people just they don't need that. This is a great invention. I forget the guy's name. It's just great. It's the best jack plate or socket replacement.
With the concave, it looks like you can find the hole quickly.
It fits a Telecaster, but it also drops right into a standard Gibson 3/4 hole without much trouble. They don't spin out. They don't loosen. All those jack headaches, this has completely solved that issue. What I did do was add in this light.
That's an interesting feature.
It came off a 1940s stereo system that my uncle used to listen to when he was in the Navy. Jokingly, I call it an idiot light because I say it attracts idiots who think that this really matters. It does 3 things. It tells you that the guitar is plugged in. It tells you that the battery is good. It tells you that the bulb works.
It is funny, and it matches your knobs.
It matches the knobs, and I wanted it to give a certain look.
Well, let's hear what it sounds like. This is Dave's Mor Paul. We're playing through a tube combo amp with no effects, just a little reverb.
We got plenty of single coil hum here, folks. To me, the Mor Paul is what I call the ultimate in excess. It's totally over the top. It's the ultimate excessive rock and roll guitar. The Gibson Les Paul was not what I had spent all that time staring at it, imagining. I thought all this stuff about the guitar that I couldn't get. It was in that showcase, and I it's like the woman you think you're gonna meet someday.
All in your imagination.
And you imagine all the things about it. But the Gibson Les Paul had none of that. It was a whole different animal. So what I decided I would do is I would turn this into the look of my favorite guitar, but physically and mathematically, it's that guitar with a slimmer neck.